to introduce herself and share her insights and wisdom and an invitation for us to journey on the Camino together.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks, Trisha. It's an honor for me to be here with all of you today, and I'm super excited to share with you about the Camino de Santiago, both just the trail and the experience, the pilgrimage itself, and also these two potential trips coming up next year, and to help explain what's going to be available with it, and also to answer any questions that you may have. So I first walked the Camino de Santiago in 2018, and it was a time in my life where I was working with the church in Charlotte, and I knew it was time for me to move into another call, but I wasn't finding a call out there that I wanted. The opportunities that were coming available to me, they just didn't feel right. I didn't feel God's presence in them. And so one day, it was my day off, and I had just gone out paddleboarding, and I came home and I just had this nudge to turn on the TV. And so I turned it on, and Rick Steves' travel show was on, and he was on the Camino de Santiago trail. And so I just got sucked in instantly, and I was sitting there watching it. And I had wanted to walk the Camino for quite a few years before that moment, but I could never imagine when the right time in my life would be to walk it. I always assumed it would be during my retirement years. And so I'm just sitting there and I'm watching the show, and I'm just, falling in love with the whole visual experience that I'm seeing. And I keep asking myself, when's the right time to do this? So, can I wait 20 years until I retire to walk the Camino? And all of a sudden, this light bulb literally felt like it clicked over my head, where it just said, now is the time to walk the Camino. So long story short, I resigned from my call. I sold my house, and I gave away half my possessions and put the other half into storage. And I knew to the bone, the marrow of my existence, that it was the right time for me to walk the Camino. It doesn't mean that I wasn't scared, that I didn't have so many questions and doubts about what I was doing, but the call, the sense to do it was always a little bit stronger than the fear of, why am I doing this? And is this the right thing to be doing? So I go and I walk the Camino within 2 months of making the decision and to walk it. And I did the Frances trail, which, if any of you have seen the movie The Way, that is the trail that Martin Sheen walks in memory of his son Emilio Estevez in the movie. And it's also the most popular Camino trail that there is. Now, there's Camino trails all over Europe and technically all over the world. But the Frances is the most popular and most famous one. And it's 500 miles roughly from a village in the Pyrenees Mountains in the Basque Country that is close to the edge of the French border and the Spanish border. And so you walk over the Pyrenees Mountains, through the wine country, through the Great Plains, and then through the rainforests of northern Spain until you get to Santiago. And that experience of walking the Camino was the coolest thing I'd ever experienced in my life. It literally changed the trajectory of my life, but it also changed me personally. And I'll share more about that, as time comes on. And if we continue in these conversations, I'll be happy to share more about that. But one of the things that really changed within me was my concept of being a pilgrim and what it means to live a life of pilgrimage. Now, I have to be honest and say, when I first started the Camino, I had no personal concept of being a pilgrim. As a Gen Xer, I just always thought of pilgrims as the founders of our country. Like some of the early founders of our country, they wore drab dress, they had really strict social laws, things that I just personally could not relate or connect to. And so I really resisted that term of pilgrim for the majority of my walk, honestly. And it was after my Camino where I really began to recognize myself as a pilgrim and what it means to live a life that is pilgrimage. So just, to kind of put a question out for you to personally think about for yourself right now is, how would you describe a pilgrim? How would you define a pilgrim? And is that something that you feel an instant attraction to in that identity, into that image, into that term? Or is it something that just feels kind of a little resistant or foreign or just not something that you would gravitate towards? Well, with time, I think for most people that walk the Camino, they do start to recognize or see that somehow their life is a pilgrimage, and that the Camino itself is a way to physically walk a pilgrimage, but it's a smaller example of a bigger reality of what we are experiencing in our lives, that we're all on a spiritual journey, going hopefully intentionally towards the heart of what we're wanting and what we're looking for. And so I do see all people, whether they're people walking on the Camino, there are people that are within the churches and the ministries that I am connected with, or whether they're the people that I am trying to dodge my cart in and around at Target, or trying to drive on the Dodge Freeway, Dodge Expressway without getting too angry at them for driving slower than I want to be driving. Everybody, I believe, is a pilgrim, and that we all are in a pilgrimage journey in our lives. Now, the traditional definition of pilgrim in the Latin term is peregrinus, and that means stranger in an unknown land, making a sacred journey. And so that idea of being a stranger, I could really connect with that in being on the Camino, because it's a different country, it's a different culture, it's a different continent, it's a different language. Everything about Spain and the Basque Country and the Gaelic country that I walked through was so different than who I was. And so there was comfort in that identity of being okay with being a stranger and walking the Camino, that I'm not expected to fit in and blend into the society and the culture around me, but that I'm welcomed and I'm respected for being that stranger in their midst, walking through that journey. So as I spent time after my Camino really thinking about what the Camino was for me personally, and starting to see myself not only as a stranger in Spain, but starting to see myself spiritually as a stranger in this world, I started to recognize that for myself, I see my pilgrimage as an intentional journey towards the heart of God, getting to know the love of God that's real and tangible and purposeful, not only in my life, but in the events of this world. And so I started to develop more of that concept and that identity and that awareness for myself, that it's okay to be a little bit strange in this world, when that means that I am being strange because I want to become more like the love of God in this world. And so the idea of walking the Camino was, like I said, a smaller expression of a larger reality that was happening in me. So the physical walk was an example of an inward spiritual journey that I am still on and am dedicating my life towards. So the Camino de Santiago, I often get asked, why do I need to go to another continent, another country, to do such a walk, to do such a pilgrimage? Why is the Camino such an important thing? Well, just quickly to give you the background of the story of the Camino, it is based on a legend. How much of that legend is true and how much of it is a myth, we don't know for sure. But the story of the Camino de Santiago is it's a pilgrimage being made to a city called Santiago, and Santiago de Compostela. Santiago is named after Jesus's disciple named St. James, and you'll know St. James as one of the sons of Zebedee, sons of thunder in the gospel stories. Well, James, when the disciples after Jesus' ascension to God's presence and the Holy Spirit was with them, James was one of the disciples that went out on mission to share the love of God that we got to know through Jesus. And so he went to the Iberian Peninsula, and that's the area of Spain and Portugal. And he spent a good number of years there, trying to bring the message of God's love through Jesus to the people, but he faced a lot of opposition, a lot of resistance to the message. And there's a side story where apparently he was really discouraged. He sat on a riverbank and was just overwhelmed with discouragement when he had a vision of Jesus's mother, Mary, who was still alive at that time, appeared to him on the riverbank in the rivers, the one that goes through Santiago. And she encourages them to keep at it, to keep with the mission. And so James does, but then he eventually goes back to Jerusalem. And then, long story short, James is one of the followers of Jesus, one of the early Christians who Herod had brought into the arena and had killed many of them. And James was the first of Jesus's 12 disciples who were martyred, and he was decapitated. So the story gets a little more interesting from here. So there's two different possibilities that the legend offers us. One is that James' friends knew that he had a heart for the Iberian Peninsula, and particularly the northern part. So they returned his remains, his physical remains, to that area and buried him there. The other legend is that the disciples of James put James' remains in a stone boat. So it's a miracle story. Put James' remains in a stone boat, and it somehow traveled across the Mediterranean Sea and landed in the banks of Spain. We don't know for sure what the story is true and what of it is myth, but anyway, 900 years go by and everybody's kind of forgotten the story or the thought that James had been buried in Spain. And there was a humble shepherd who was out in the field one night and he saw a star, a bright star in the sky, and he was attracted to it. And so he followed this star. And as he followed this star, he came upon the remains of a body that was decapitated. Well, he'd remembered the legend of James being buried somewhere in that area. So he went to tell his bishop. His bishop went to look at it, and upon seeing it, declared that that was the body of James that was buried there. So they built a church there to give homage to James, and they encouraged people to travel from around the area to come and pay their respects to it. This gets a little interesting in the legend because at that same time, there was a struggle in Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula, for the land between the Catholic nation and between the Moors. There were many Moors living in that area, and so there were the Muslims from northern Africa. So there was constant violence and battle going for land. There is some art that depicts the image of James as fighting the Moors to rid them of the land and to declare the land Catholic. A lot of scholars would now say that the story of James was used in sense as propaganda for the Catholic Church to try to declare this area as a Catholic sacred site and to gain control of the land. There's a lot of discussion, heated discussion and debate on the Camino about what is real and what's not real, about the story of how Santiago became what it is today. Whatever the truth of it is, though, in the legend or the myth of it, there is something special that people experience when they're walking the Camino. For people that are walking it in a sacred walk of a Christian faith, there's something special that's experienced. For those that are walking it in a more open mind frame and a more open spirituality, there's still something sacred, something special that happens for them. For those that have no religious background, no religious intent on this walk, which the majority of people walking the Camino now say that they're not doing it as a religious experience, there's still something special that's happening for people as they're walking the Camino. We'll hear many people talk on the Camino about the Camino as the spiritual experience and almost as a spiritual entity. So there's this saying that you'll hear people that have walked the Camino, they'll tell their stories of how the Camino provides. And that means that there's something along the Camino where they had a need or a want, or there was something that they were longing for, and that somehow through whatever circumstances it may be, the the longing or the need or the want that they had was met, was filled for them, and oftentimes by really bizarre and unusual ways. And so those become really cherished Camino provides stories. And then there's also just this concept of walking the Camino, and there's the Camino way, the way people interact with each other, the way people respect and support one another, even though most of us are total strangers. When we first meet on the Camino, there's a companionship, a familiarity of shared spirit and shared desire to have this experience that people have. And so we'll talk about that being the Camino way. So there's something spiritually that is happening for people on the Camino, whether it is from a Christian background or a non-Christian background. Something is drawing people there, and something is meeting them, meeting their hearts and their souls during that time. Now, on the Camino, there are people from all over the world walking. I've met people from Estonia and Latvia that have less than 2 million people in their country. And so it feels like just such an unreal moment to meet people that are there walking it. I know of people that are on the Camino right now that are from Gaza, and they are staying on the Camino because it's a safe space for them, and they can't go back. I've met people from Ukraine and from Russia who have been on the Camino and are staying somewhere near the Camino because it's a safe place for them where their homeland is not. I've met people from every country in South America. I've met people from most of the Asian nations and many African nations. And there's so many Australians and New Zealanders on the Camino that it's just this remarkable experience of having a global community right there on a trail with you and sharing your stories, sharing your heartaches, sharing your dreams, becoming soul brothers and soul sisters with one another, no matter what your mother tongue is or what your national flag is. Now, going back to the question, why do we need to travel across the world to have such a pilgrimage experience like this? Well, there's a lot of different answers to that. Having an experience on a trail that's over 1,000 years old, that has history and stories and literally weathered footprints on the trail of pilgrims of past, is such a remarkable experience of pilgrimage that we don't have in the United States particularly. My friend Cassie, who's joining us on the Zoom call, she was with this last group that I led a couple of weeks ago. And she and I walked on a trail that is part of the original trail that people have been walking for more than hundreds and hundreds of years on. And the trail has literally dipped below the surface of the soil by more than a story, more than a floor, because so many pilgrims have walked through it throughout the years. And so you're walking through this vineyard, and you see the grapevines hanging over you, and you're literally a floor below it because so many pilgrims have walked that path. So there's something of antiquity, there's something of eternalness in that experience of knowing that you are weathering the footprints of previous pilgrims. And there's an honor and a privilege of knowing that you're carrying a journey that others have journeyed before you with. Now, the Camino de Santiago also has an infrastructure that we don't have in any of our trail systems around the US, in that it has a series of albergues. And albergues is Spanish for basically the term hostel. A series of albergues where when you're walking the Camino, there are dedicated places for pilgrims only to stay in. And it's affordable lodging. It's safe, it's warm, it's protected, and it's a great place for pilgrims to meet and interact with each other. There's also restaurants and diners and cafes and bars that are dedicated to the pilgrim experience as well, that provide menus that are on a budget for people who are spending, whether it's a week to a month to 6 weeks doing this walk. And so there's food, there's drinks, there's desserts that are all geared towards pilgrims to give them sustenance and also a taste of the culture that fits with the budget. There's donativos, these amazing little things set up along the way that will have food and drink and sunscreen and whatever it may be, a hat or a purse or whatever, on tables set up. And it's for your taking, and you leave a donation for whatever you want to offer, whatever you think it's worth or whatever you're able to offer. And it's just this goodwill offering that they have set up. There's pilgrims masses in many of the towns and villages where the church will offer a special blessing, a special service for those that are walking the way. And then there's even just the practical reality of what we'd call physical therapists. There they call physios that are available for people who pull a hamstring or who have trouble with meniscus, or people who have plantar fasciitis or some sort of muscular discomfort. There's medical trained partners along the Camino that provide those services at fair prices so that pilgrims can continue on this journey. So the infrastructure of the Camino is profound to me. It just always blows my mind about how every need we have is thought out and available at fair prices and with respect and love towards the pilgrim experience. And then there's also something really special about the Camino, and that's that the path is literally marked the whole way. So while we can use apps and GPSs to find our way, the real pilgrim experience, though, and most pilgrims will do this, is to just follow the way markers that they see on the Camino. And so you'll see pictures of the yellow arrows that will be painted on the side of buildings or on the ground, on the curbs. You'll see scallop shells, and all of those are way markers that help you know that you're going in the right way. And sometimes they'll have an arrow to point you in the direction if the path is going to be changing from the straightforward way. So it's a very well thought out geographical infrastructure as well in helping pilgrims know that they're on the way. But oftentimes, not oftentimes, every pilgrim at some point is going to get off the way at some point. And there's so many beautiful stories of people encountering a local who will come and say, "Oh, no, you're going the wrong direction, go this way." And they'll stop and they'll help re-guide you into the right way. And so those being off path moments can actually become really sacred experiences of seeing how the Camino provides, how God provides to give direction and guidance when we didn't know we needed it. And why else would we consider the Camino de Santiago? Well, if you've seen the movie The Way, you know how cool Martin Sheen made it look. And so it really is like that. It really does feel that way when you connect with the other pilgrims, when you have the days of rain or when something drops in the river or you're meeting locals. I wouldn't say that everybody has something stolen the way Martin Sheen's character did in The Way. But there are many of those experiences are experiences that we all do really experience on the Camino. So it's one of the movies that truly nailed the life experience on the head. So what Soul Ventures and I are working together to offer for this 2024 season is 2 different types of guided spiritual pilgrimages. So you always have the opportunity to walk a pilgrimage on your own, to do the Camino on your own. And I want to say upfront, if you have however small of a desire, if you have any desire to walk it on your own, I really want to encourage you to really consider that and to maybe trust that nudge of the Spirit to do that walk on your own. Because a pilgrimage is ultimately a spiritual experience. It's a spiritual journey. And so for some of us, the original way that we do it may need to be on our own. But for many of us, we can't imagine doing something like this on our own, or we just don't want to do it on our own. We know that we get more out of the experience when we're in a group, when we have like-minded people that are with us. I will say that when I walked the first Camino, I noticed quickly it can become really easy to lose the spiritual essence of it when doing it on your own, because there's a fun social network there that happens on the Camino, and so it can really become about the social relationships that you're developing. It can also become this sense of adventure and this sense of fitness, and so wanting to push yourself to walk as far or as fast or as long as you can. So that can become more the priority. So and also if you're not Spanish speaking, it may not always feel easy to connect with the spiritual masses, the pilgrim masses that are available in the churches. So if there's a desire for you to really have a spiritual experience on the Camino, then I would encourage you to really think about these spiritual guided pilgrimages. What I would be offering through these pilgrimages is not a service as a tour guide, but as a spiritual guide on the Camino. It's an opportunity that what I would provide would be an opportunity for you to engage more with the presence of God's Spirit with you as you're preparing for the Camino, during the Camino, and after the Camino. So I've walked nearly 2,000 miles of different Caminos around the European map of Caminos. I've walked the Frances. I've walked from Santiago to Finisterre. I've done parts of the Camino Norte, which is along the northern coast. I've done part of the Camino in Switzerland that goes through the Alps. I've done part of the Camino in France that leads into the Frances in the Pyrenees. And I've also done part of the Porto, the Portuguese route. And so I have a good sense, a good understanding of the culture of Camino, the way it looks in different cultures. I also have a good sense of what pilgrim etiquette is and how we learn to interact and to walk with the other pilgrims in a way that is hopefully in harmony, in being simpatico with the other pilgrims, and also how to develop our own sense of respect for the Basque, Spanish, Gallego culture that these two groups would be going through, because the Basque, Spanish, and Gallego cultures are all distinctly different and all very present in the Camino experience. As a spiritual guide, I would be able to help you focus a lot on the spiritual side of the pilgrimage and not worry as much on the logistical side, which I know for many pilgrims, that part can be really stressful and feel scary and overwhelming. And so I would help you understand what the terrain is going to be each day of what we're going to be walking. I would help you know how to plan your training for the Camino beforehand, and then also how to listen to your body and care for it while you're on the Camino. It's really important for us to recognize what our body is telling us when we're on the Camino. And Cassie and I can share some more stories about that a little bit later, if you like. I could also, as a spiritual guide, I would also help you develop your own packing list, what to bring and what you may be tempted to bring, but what you necessarily don't need to bring. And also what resources are good for you in preparing for the Camino. I would offer a series of Zoom chats that would help you prepare for this Camino experience, both on the logistical sense, but also in the spiritual sense. And then for the different walks, I would plan out the beginning stages of our walking. So I would have each day's walking stage planned out and our accommodations booked in advance for where we would stay that night, so you wouldn't be stressing or worrying about trying to make those type of arrangements or reservations. I'd also help if you wanted to ship bags ahead. I would help you be able to ship bags ahead to Santiago if you were planning to do a larger trip around Europe. We would be able to send a bag ahead, so you don't have to worry about having those things with you on the Camino. But then also, if you don't feel like you have the strength or the physical ability to carry your own backpack the whole way with all of your items for the Camino, we can do a daily transport of a bag where you would just have a day pack for the walk, but a daily transport of a bag that would have your pajamas, your next day's clothes, your toiletries, things like that. And then I would also be able to help you if you do have an injury, to be able to help secure transportation, to help you find a physio, and to help you consider what's the right amount of distance to walk, or if you need to sit out for a day or two to rest. And then most of all, I would provide spiritual guidance. So the spiritual guidance would be offering spiritual direction, a one-on-one spiritual direction session before the Camino, having interaction and conversations while we're on the Camino about what you're recognizing is happening in your spirit, or what you're questioning and wondering about what's happening in your spirit, and then having a spiritual direction session after the Camino. And every morning I would also offer spiritual reflection, one spiritual reflection question for you to consider as you're walking. And they're very open questions. And at the end of the day, I would offer a time where we would all get together before dinner, and we could have a cup of coffee, cafe con leche, we could have a glass of wine, beer, Coca-Cola, whatever. And we would chat about this, the spiritual reflection question from that day, and also our experience, and be able to unpack that time together. And then I would also be able to have just more one-on-one type of conversations along the Camino if there was something that was really stirring within you, nudging within you, that is something your spirit was wanting to unpack. And all of those conversations, when they're one-on-one, stay completely confidential. I wouldn't share those with the group unless you initiated that to be shared in the group. So I just threw out a lot of information to you, and I will tell you about the two particular groups that are coming up for this fall, or I'm sorry, for this spring and fall next year. But I was just wondering real quickly, do any of you have any questions about the Camino, or have any one, yeah, if there's anything you would like to ask or say about the Camino in general? No, okay.
I would just like to emphasize, and thank you, Laura, for that beautifully well-rounded history lesson on the Camino, and also its value in our daily lives of faith too. I want to add one comment about this, that this partnership felt so right for Tricia and me with Laura, because it continues our commitment to also creating spaces for women who want the experience of traveling solo but not alone. And so the way Laura has created a schedule on the Camino allows for some independence, but enough structure and support that I think you feel safe, which I know is an important value, especially for women traveling. And while we stick our neck out and maybe try some new things beyond our comfort zone in being in a challenging situation, you would receive support throughout the time on the trail, and even before, as you're preparing for this big event, and even after the event. So these are the values that I think that this trip provides for the participants.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that, because for every day, you would have your own freedom to start walking at whatever time you wanted to start walking, to walk as fast as you wanted to walk, to stop as many times as you wanted to stop. We would meet up. I would have a time at the evening where we could meet up and just have an unpacking time and chat. But it wouldn't be required or expected. It's just an open invitation. And then there would be depending on which trip, there would be a couple of dinners that would be scheduled that I would encourage everybody to come for the dinners, but most nights you would be open to having dinner whenever, however you would like. So sometimes you may want to do a full pilgrim's menu, and sometimes you may just want to grab a salad from the supermarket and just go sit in the park and quietly eat the salad. Are there any other questions or comments about the Camino in general? Okay.
I know, Laura,
Cassie, is it?
sorry. I was just gonna say,
Oh no,
you
what was
mentioned
it?
this to me, and this for me would be important to know if I was a slow walker and not feeling anxious that I was holding up the group, that you plan to stay with those you plan to stay in the back. Is that correct? Or how does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question, Trish. Yes, so I will always be the tail end of the group. So I'm happy to walk at whatever speed the group of people are walking. So if it's somebody who really, yeah, it is whatever comfort level people are walking, I will be at the very tail end of that. And then before walking the night before, I will help everybody recognize what the terrain is going to look like for the next day, give a sense of how long it will be between villages. So if people want to plan to have coffee or breakfast on the Camino and not so much where they stayed the night before, how far they should expect to walk before finding that. And also, yeah, like what the water options are for refilling water bottles and things. So I'll help everybody know what the next day's walk will logistically look like.
Are there any
And
other
also give a
questions?
sense of weather.
Are there any other questions that anyone wish to ask about the Camino specifically before we talk about proposed dates for 2024 and what the kind of the shape those trips are taking at this point? All right, Laura, why don't we move into talking
Okay.
about what 2024 trip dates are looking like for us?
Okay. So for 2024, there's two groups that we're planning, and they're two very distinctly different types of groups. The first one will be from May 30th to June 15th. So that's a total of 17 days. And this one is the ideal one for the people that want to walk the whole Camino, or at least to start to walk the whole Frances in sections if they can't do the whole thing that summer. The second one, and I'll unpack these a little bit more, but just kind of give you an understanding of the two different ones. The second one is going to be in September, and that one will be September 15th to September 21st. And that will be just the last 72 miles of the Camino from Sarria to Santiago. For those that want to get the certificate, want to walk the Camino, but don't foresee being able to spend more than a week on this type of experience. So going back to the first one is called Finding Your Feet on the Camino. And this one is dedicated to helping people, helping women who want to walk the whole Frances, walk the whole 500 miles, whether it's all at one time or whether it be section by section for the next 2 or 3 years. So for this one, we would start walking in St. Jean, and I would walk with you from St. Jean to Burgos. And there would be 14 days of walking together. We would meet first in Paris, though, on May 30th. And so everybody would fly into Paris or arrive in Paris on May 30th. And we would stay the night for 2 nights in Paris. So we would have May 31st as a time to acclimate to the time difference, acclimate to Europe, being in a different land, being strangers, literally, in a different location. And there would be some opportunities to go out and do some sightseeing around Paris. And I would organize different things if people wanted to, or if you wanted to go off and do your own thing, you're welcome to do that. On June 1st, we would take a plane from Paris to a city called Biarritz. And then from Biarritz, we would take a train to St. Jean, where we would stay the night. And then from St. Jean on June 2nd, we would walk the next 14 days to a city called Burgos. And during that time, I would walk with you for those 14 days. And for the first week, I would have all of our accommodations booked out and all of our days distance planned out in advance. And then helping you get familiar and comfortable with the Camino experience. And then after the first 7 days, then I will start to show you for the next 3 days how you would be listening to your body and making decisions on if you were to choose for yourself how far you would want to walk the next day. So we would be paying attention to how our body is feeling, what our body is craving, any new aches or discomforts we may be feeling, and also what the terrain looks like for the next day and the placement of the different villages and cities. During that time also, I would be showing you, even though I'd have all the accommodations booked already, I would be showing you how you would begin to start to make your own reservations and decide where you would want to stay and how you would go about making those reservations. And then days 11 to 13, you would begin booking your own reservations in advance. And so that I would help you with, and you would be paying attention to how your body's feeling, looking at the goal of the town that you would want to stay in. And you would be booking the night before of where you would stay the next day. And so some of you may want to walk together during that time, and some of you may want to break out and do your own distance walking at that time too. Whoever is walking the shortest distance during those stages, I will walk with that person and stay with that person. But I'm also comfortable walking ahead once that person gets to the village, walking ahead and meeting with the other groups or doing video chat with those that may be staying in other locations if they want to. But the goal then would be that everybody would meet in Burgos on the 14th. And then we would have a rest day together in Burgos. And then from that point, and Burgos is a gorgeous city. It's a place where you would want to have a rest day. It used to be a political and religious powerhouse of Europe. And so the architecture, the history, the culture, everything is really fascinating there. The food is delicious. So we would have that time there. And then from that point, and this is something you would make a decision beforehand if you wanted to do or not. From that point, you would decide if you were going to walk beyond Burgos, and maybe you'd want to walk all the way to Santiago, which I would recommend planning about a month in total time for the Frances walk, maybe a little bit more. I can help you figure that out personally based on your walking patterns. Or maybe you would want to stop in Burgos. And then the goal would be for next year, a group would be happening again from Burgos to Leon. And we would do about a 2-week walk during that time. And then the year after that from Leon to Santiago. So if you wanted to do the group experience doing the Frances, but broken up over the next 3 years, that's what that would look like. But if you wanted to do it by yourself, this would be the way that you could experience and be trained on how to do it all by yourself. Now, side note, if you don't have a desire to walk to Santiago by yourself and you don't feel comfortable doing the accommodation bookings for those last few days, you can stick with me and I will still take care of all those accommodation bookings. So there is that option out there still. But this would be an opportunity for those that really want to walk it on their own to have some training and to find their feet literally on the Camino and their confidence in doing that on their own or in small groups together if you'd like to do it. Now, the second group, which would be in September, this one is called Compostela. And that one will be for 1 week from September 15th to September 21st. For that one, we would meet in Madrid and we would have 1 night in Madrid. And then we would transport together to Sarria. And in Sarria, we would stay the night and then we would begin walking. And we would walk 5 days from Sarria to Santiago. For that one, each day's walk will be planned out and all the accommodations will be booked in advance. And then once we get to Santiago, we would attend the Pilgrim's Mass together. We'd have a special celebration dinner together in Santiago. And I would help you get your certificates while you're in Santiago. And so to get the certificate of the Camino de Santiago, it requires you to walk at least 72 miles, at least 100 kilometers into Santiago. So that would be the second group that's offered. Now, any questions about either one of those groups, or Trisha and Kate, is there any details that we should cover that I missed?
We will have this information posted to the Soul Ventures website in the coming days, and we will follow up with a direct email to each of you since you took time to participate in this call. Our plan is to launch registration no later than November 1st, and you will be granted first access to that registration because of your participation in today's Zoom. These trips do not have space for large groups. These are intimate groups, so they will sell out. We anticipate allowing for 7 registrations for each trip. Is that correct, Laura?
Yes.
Okay. So we're not talking about large group travel, which I hope actually is a comforting word for you, but it does mean that making plans to get registered as soon as you feel confident about your ability to say yes to this type of experience is important because there is limited space. We will also have finalized pricing updates with different rates of inflation right now in the current economic situation, particularly in Europe. We're looking at different price structures for this trip. So we can also share that on our website and via email with you after this call.
I have a question because the way my life is, I already know that I can't make these trips due to scheduling. And so I'm curious to know, like, about the 2025 travel. Is there any way to get those dates to at least me, like, more than a year in advance? Because this is something that I've been interested in doing since the movie came out in 2010. And this seems like a great fit. It just, unfortunately, I have things booked for 2024 during these 2 times.
I think that's definitely something we can work through, Jill. So I appreciate you asking for that. And because this is a new partnership, but one that we're very hopeful about, I foresee that we could determine 2025 dates earlier than how we've usually been doing it with Soul Ventures as we've been building this business model. And certainly share this opportunity with your networks and let folks know that this opportunity is being planned, and we'll get this information to people as they request it.
So Kate, if it's okay, I would love to ask Cassie. So Cassie just finished the Camino a little over a week ago. And I was just wondering, Cassie, like, if there was anything that you would say about the experience, if it was what you thought it would be like, if it was different, just anything that you wouldn't mind sharing.
It was a couple of weeks ago. I feel like it was a month ago, wasn't it? More than a week, but less than a month. Couple weeks. Yeah, I'm here for questions if anybody has anything. It was a wonderful experience. Everything she said is 100% accurate. It all happens. It's such a group environment that was nice to share. It's beautiful. And if you have any reservations about, oh my gosh, can I walk 74 miles in 5 days or 6 days? Yes, you can. So I was worried about that. Or even the 500 miles, like, just, you can do it. You can absolutely do it. So don't let that hold you back. And yeah, it was awesome. I would highly recommend doing this, making it work if you have a calling to do that. And I will say, I went with a group of people who had the calling for me. It wasn't my calling to do this trip. And it was still such an amazing experience. So even suggested to people, who maybe you just want to travel with, or your good friends, like, this was kind of a good trip for Laura and I too, because we've been friends for a long time. So, it doesn't have to be somebody who just has the calling to do this. So I would put it out there for anybody, even just somebody who's active or somebody who wants to have that spiritual experience, or somebody who just, you want to travel with and have a good couple weeks with, or a month with, or however, long this trip is going to be. So, but if you have any questions, oh, I forgot. This is my Camino Santiago hat. I forgot to put my Camino hat on. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know, but you can do it. That's my bottom line.
Cassie, thank you for saying that, because that's one of the things that you and I had talked about before, is you had some reservations about whether you would be able to physically walk it. And really, our bodies adapt. And not only do they adapt to the experience, then they crave the experience. Like it wants to walk each day after you get past the first couple of days.
And it is magical and spiritual and divine, in the sense that I was concerned that I couldn't walk that much, even though I, walked, let's say 4 miles a day, maybe. I did. There was no issues. So you're on the trail and you're in the experience, and it works. And you have more strength and more energy and more desire. And you're waking up and you're walking for the day. That's what you do. You don't need to rush. Walking slow probably works to your advantage, because you're just meandering around and enjoying the experience and the culture and the food and the people and the visual beauty and whatever spiritual you pull into all of those experiences. And then at the end of the day, you're like, wow, I just walked 15 miles, so. And Laura is a great leader, and she, I didn't have to plan anything. So I wasn't the experience where I wanted to learn to do it on my own. I just wanted her to do it. So that, eliminates that weight of having to deal with that. If that's the path that you want to go, it's just an even lighter experience, because you don't have to worry about those details. You just show up and you do it, and, enjoy it in that way too. So that was my experience.
Thank you, Cassie. One thing that I think that is most valuable about this is the way that Laura will tend to you, and to also what the group is needing throughout the experience. If you Google the Camino, you know that hundreds of options, tour guide options, will come up in your search. But I think one that's particular to this one is the care with which Laura will guide us on the trail and be providing very particular support for you, so that it's very authentic, and it's about tending to more than just the mechanics of the hike and getting from point A to point B, getting your bags to where they need to be, which is an important logistic. And many tour guides and companies offer that. But what this trip is offering has more depth and more support that is tailored to your specific needs. That's what I think is of such quality that Laura brings into this space, and I'm grateful for that.
And can I add one more thing?
Please.
We had 6 people in our group, and everybody did their own, time. We didn't stay together. So don't feel like, oh, if I go with a group, I'm going to have to, walk someone else's pace. It all works out, and it still is a one-on-one experience with Laura. You walk how far you want to walk, you'll meet somewhere, and then you'll walk more. And so you can have a group experience if you want to be with somebody, but you can also have an individual experience within the group.
Laura, I know you will prepare us spiritually and with our to-do list. So what about physically? What is the preparation that we need to do to walk?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, I would say just being able to walk somewhere between 5 to 7 miles a few times a week is a good place to know for your body that you'll be capable of doing this. As it gets closer, people are tempted to try to walk the long distances, and that's not so much the pattern that we need to develop. It's more the pattern of walking every day, because that'll be what's more the shock for your body, is that you're walking a distance every day. So if right now, if you're not already, if you start to walk 5 to 7 miles, like 3, 4 times a week, that's a good place to begin. And then as it gets closer, I'll start to suggest like walking every day, a certain amount of distance, and then starting to up the distances a little bit.
Well, we're just past the 1 o'clock hour for those of us on Eastern time. If there aren't any other questions, know that you'll get a communication directly from Trisha and me and Soul Ventures email. That communication will include our website link, and we are available for more conversation. If you have any other questions after we hang up on this call, feel free to reach out via email. Or find us on Instagram or Facebook and shoot us a message that way. But with that, I think we will say farewell. Thank you, Laura, for sharing some time with us. Tell everybody in France we said hello. As you stroll and enjoy your cafes and your croissants and other treats. And thanks to each of you. It was a joy meeting you and seeing familiar faces, and look forward to sharing the journey with you in some form, some way. Thank you all.
Thanks. Well, thanks everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.